Ursula, thank you for that presentation. It's always a real pleasure to follow you on this stage as we work ever more closely together. Ladies and gentlemen, for many years, for most people in the United Kingdom, war has been remote, something that concerns us deeply, but which happens far away. But now we feel the solidity of peace, the very ground that we stand on, softening under our feet. It is the job of leaders to be ahead of these seismic shifts. Yet that is against the grain of history. Time and again, leaders have looked the other way, only rearming when disaster is upon them. This time must be different, because all of the warning signs are there. Russia has proved its appetite for aggression, bringing terrible suffering to the Ukrainian people. Its hybrid threats extend across our continent, not just threatening our security, but tearing at our social contract, collaborating with populists who undermine our values, using disinformation to sow division, using cyber attacks and sabotage to disrupt our lives, and deepening the cost of living crisis. Now, it's true that Russia has made a huge strategic blunder in Ukraine, and that Russian casualties number well over 1 million. But even as the war goes on, Russia is rearming, reconstituting their armed forces, an industrial base. NATO has warned that Russia could be ready to use military force against the alliance by the end of this decade. In the event of a peace deal in Ukraine, which we're all working hard to achieve, Russia's rearmament would only accelerate. The wider danger for Europe would not end there. It would increase. So we must answer this threat in full. At the outset, it is important to be clear. We do not seek conflict. Our objective is lasting peace, a return to strategic stability and the rule of law. But in the face of these threats, there is only one viable option before us. Now, to break the convention of 1,000 speeches, we are not at a crossroads today. The road ahead is straight and it is clear. We must build our hard power, because that is the currency of the age. We must be able to deter aggression. And yes, if necessary, we must be ready to fight, to do whatever it takes to protect our people, our values, and our way of life. And as Europe, we must stand on our own 2 feet. Now, that means being bolder. It means putting away petty politics and short-term concerns. It means acting together to build a stronger Europe and a more European NATO, underpinned by deeper links between the UK and the EU, across defence, industry, tech, politics, and the wider economy. Because these are the foundations on which our security and prosperity will rest. This is how we'll build a better future for our continent, true to the vibrant, free, and diverse societies that we represent, showing that people who look different to each other can live peacefully together, that this isn't against the tenor of our times. Rather, it's what makes us strong, as we're prepared to defend it with everything that we have. Now, we are not the Britain of the Brexit years anymore, because we know And that is because we know that in a dangerous world, we would not take control by turning inward. We would surrender it. And I won't let that happen. That's why I devote time as Prime Minister to Britain's leadership on the world stage. And that's why I'm here today. Because I am clear, there is no British security without Europe, and no European security without Britain. That is the lesson of history, and is today's reality as well. So together, we must rise to this moment. We must spend more, deliver more, and coordinate more. And crucially, we must do this with the United States. The US remains an indispensable ally. Its contribution to European security over 80 years is unparalleled, and so is our gratitude. At the same time, we recognise that things are changing. The US national security strategy spells out that Europe must take primary responsibility for its own defence. That is the new normal. Now, there have been a series of thoughtful interventions about what this means, including the argument that we're at a moment of rupture. Now, I would agree that the world has changed fundamentally and that we must find new ways to uphold our values and the rule of law. But in responding to that change, we must not disregard everything that has sustained us for the last 80 years. That could prove to be a moment of destruction. But instead, I believe we must make this a moment of creation. Instead of a moment of rupture, we must make it one of radical renewal. So, rather than pretending that we can simply replace all US capabilities, we should focus on diversifying and decreasing some dependencies. We should deliver generational investments that moves us from overdependence to interdependence. I'm talking about a vision of European security and greater European autonomy that does not herald US withdrawal, but answers the call for more burden sharing in full and remakes the ties that have served us so well. Because we know the value of what we have. The NATO alliance is a phenomenon in human history. It achieved something that leaders had been trying to do for centuries, from Westphalia to the Congress of Vienna to Versailles. After centuries of conflict, the founders of NATO finally united our continent in peace and security. Our militaries that once faced each other on the battlefield now stand side by side, pledged to each other's defence. It is the shield over our heads every single day. Now, while some on the extremes of our politics chip away at this alliance, we defend it. I am proud that my party fought for NATO's creation. What our then Foreign Secretary Ernie Bevan called a spiritual union of the West. And we've shown our fidelity to that ideal, asserting each other's sovereignty, as we did on Greenland, and crucially, coming to each other's aid under Article 5. We fought together in Afghanistan at terrible cost to many in my country and across many allied countries. And so I say to all NATO members, our commitment to Article 5 is as profound now as ever. And be in no doubt, if called on, the UK would come to your aid today. Now, Europe must not turn its back on this. Instead, we must move forward together to create a more European NATO. As I see it, Europe is a sleeping giant. Our economies dwarf Russia's more than 10 times over. We have huge defence capabilities. Yet, too often, this adds up to less than the sum of its parts. Fragmented industrial planning and procurement have led to gaps in some areas and massive duplication in others. Europe has over 20 types of frigate and 10 types of fighter jet. We have over 10 types of main battle tank, whilst the US has one. It's wildly inefficient, and it harms our collective security. Now, the US security umbrella has allowed these bad habits to develop, but now we must break them. And we have shown that we can coordinate to great effect, as Ursula has just set out, supporting Ukraine in a way that Putin never really imagined, creating the coalition of the willing, which now covers almost all of Europe, as well as Canada and our friends in the Asia-Pacific. And going further in our support, with the UK announcing over £500 million this week for more air defence for the Ukrainian people. To meet the wider threat, it is clear that we are going to have to spend more, faster. And we've shown our collective intent in this regard as well, with the historic agreement to increase spending to 5% on security and defence. And we're prepared to explore innovative solutions. So we're stepping up work with like-minded allies on options for a collective approach to defence financing to help accelerate this vital investment. And as we increase spending, we must use it to its full potential. We must come together to integrate our capabilities, spending and procurement, and build a joint European defence industry. I welcome the steps that have been taken so far, which could allow us to participate in the £90 billion euro loan to Ukraine. I hope we can work together like this going forward, because, look, the logic of defence is solidarity and collective effort, not market access. In a crisis, our citizens expect us to be ready, so we need to deliver a step change in collaboration. And I'm proud of the work we're already doing together, delivering cutting-edge drones with Ukraine, developing next-generation long-range missiles with Germany, Italy and France, working with our JEF allies to protect our northern flank, doubling our deployment of British commandos in the Arctic, taking control of NATO's Atlantic and Northern Command in Norfolk, Virginia, and transforming our Royal Navy by striking the biggest warship deal in British history with Norway. We're building a fleet of warships to hunt Russian submarines and protect undersea infrastructure. We want to replicate this level of collaboration with other allies across the High North and the Baltic. And I can announce today that the UK will deploy our carrier strike group to the North Atlantic and the High North this year, led by HMS Prince of Wales, operating alongside the US, Canada and other NATO allies, in a powerful show of our commitment to Euro-Atlantic security. that is also why we're enhancing our nuclear cooperation with France. For decades, the United Kingdom has been the only nuclear power in Europe to commit its deterrent to protect all NATO members. But now, any adversary must know that in a crisis, they could be confronted by our combined strength. It shows beyond doubt how vital it is that we work together. So we must also look at what more we can do with the EU. We must go beyond the historic steps that we took at last year's UK-EU summit to build the formidable productive power and innovative strength that we need. British companies already account for over a quarter of the continent's defence industrial base. They are job-creating, community-building machine, employing around 239,000 people across the United Kingdom, including in Wales, where this month we're launching the first of 5 regional defence growth deals. We want to bring our leadership in defence, tech and AI together with Europe to multiply our strengths and build a shared industrial base across our continent, which can turbocharge our defence production. And that requires leadership to drive greater coherence and coordination across Europe. That is what we're doing with Germany and France in the E3, working closely with EU partners, particularly Italy and Poland, as well as with Norway, Canada and Turkey. So my message today is the United Kingdom is ready. We see the imperative, we see the urgency. We want to work together to lead a generational shift in defence industrial cooperation. Now, this includes looking again at closer economic alignment. We are already aligned with the single market in some areas to drive down the prices of food and energy. We are trusted partners. And as the Chancellor of the Exchequer said this week, deeper economic integration is in all of our interests. So we must look at where we could move closer to the single market in other sectors as well, where that would work for both sides. The prize here is greater security, stronger growth for the United Kingdom and the EU, which will fuel increased defence spending, and the chance to place the UK at the centre of a wave of European industrial renewal. I understand the politics very well. It will mean trade-offs, but the status quo is not fit for purpose. And to me, there's no question where the national interest lies, and I will always fight for what's best for my country. I started today talking about avoiding the mistakes of the past, like delaying action or fragmenting our efforts. But there's something else. In the 1930s, leaders were too slow to level with the public about the fundamental shift in mindset that was required. So we must work harder today to build consent for the decisions we must take to keep us safe. Because if we don't, the peddlers of easy answers are ready on the extremes of left and right, and they will offer their solutions instead. It's striking that the different ends of the spectrum share so much. Soft on Russia, weak on NATO, if not outright opposed, and determined to sacrifice the relationship we need on the altar of their ideology. The future they offer is one of division, and then capitulation. The lamps would go out across Europe once again. But we will not let that happen. If we believe in our values, in democracy, liberty, and the rule of law, this is the moment to stand up and to fight for them. That is why we must work together and show that by taking responsibility for our own security, we will help our people look forward, not with fear, but with determination and with hope. Thank you very much.
Very clearly spelled. Prime Minister, President, welcome. Thank you for those addresses. Clearly a call to arms, and we can discuss a little bit. But first I want to ask you, there were a couple of applause lines for Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He said, it's neither our wish or our goal to destroy the transatlantic alliance. So I want to know whether you feel convinced by that, whether you feel that the feathers are being, unruffled after last year's broadside, which was exactly the opposite from the American Speaker, Vice President J.D. Vance.
So I was very much reassured by the speech of the Secretary of State. We know him. He's a good friend, a strong ally. Indeed, this was for me very reassuring to listen to him. We know that in the administration some have a harsher tone on these topics, but the Secretary of State was very clear. He said, we want a strong Europe in the alliance. And this is what we are working for intensively in the European Union. We have to be an independent Europe, not a Europe that is leaning on someone, but a Europe that is going forward with friends and allies together, facing the challenges that are out there. And therefore, a strong Europe, I completely align with the Secretary of State where that is concerned. But we have to build it. We have to work for it, a strong and independent Europe, to be then a strong ally in NATO, because NATO is consistent then of our friends and allies indeed. But it was also your message. We want a strong Europe. And this is, I think, the message of today, which reflected and was echoed very much in the speech of the Secretary of State.
I thought the Secretary of State's speech was consistent with the argument that Ursula made in her remarks a moment ago and the argument I'm making. I think it's really clear, though, that we shouldn't get in the warm bath of complacency and think that, therefore, all we're really doing is reasserting the continuation of what we've had for the last 80 years. That would be a mistake, and it'd be a particular mistake for Europe, because my strong view is that Europe hasn't done enough in its own defence and security for many years. And the conflict in Ukraine has flushed that out, shown it to be the reality. And it falls to us as leaders to recognise that, to change and strengthen Europe, which is what I'm arguing for, what Ursula is arguing for, and not just say that, but follow it with actions. And Ursula's taken the lead on this in the work that she's done, particularly on the funding of the defence work that needs to be done, because we will only be able to preserve NATO in the way it is needed for the next 80 years if we change and strengthen the European dimension. That is something which a number of American presidents have said for some time, I believe to be true, and I think we've got to seize this movement to move forward, not to pull apart the transatlantic relationship, but to make sure it works in the circumstances and the times that we face.
Now, I know you want to embrace the United States. You talked about not overly depending, but not also rejecting the US. But you know that the Munich Security Conference doctrine, before this conference began, talked about an era of demolition politics, demolition men, the politics of destruction, etc., including referencing the President of the United States. A very key American former Republican, he calls himself, analyst has said that America is, under Trump, is playing a role of a hostile and probably, possibly predatory power as well. So Europe is caught between a predatory Russia and a potentially predatory United States. Have you internalized that? And is that where you are right now in terms of these fighting words that you've just delivered about pretty much total independence? Do you believe that you are between two predatory powers?
There are more threats. First of all, I would never align Russia with the United States. Completely different theaters. But
these were not my words. These were an analyst.
Yeah, okay. So I would not at all confer with this analyst that there's any equidistance between Russia and the United States, very clearly. But of course, the European Union is challenged with superpowers that are outreaching much more than they used to, and many other threats. And Russia is a real threat to us, without any question. So this is the reason why we have to strengthen our own defense posture, why we have to look into the possibilities that we have, for example, with the Article 42.7, while we have to develop our defense industrial base. So independence is action also to be stronger. This also is on the economic side, very clearly diversifying with like-minded partners. The trade agreement we did with India, the trade agreement we have with Mercosur, so the Latin American countries, Mexico, all this is within a strategy to be more independent, more stronger. And independent means to stand up, develop your own strength, be clear with your own weaknesses. Don't look at others to compensate for your own weaknesses. No, be strong, stand up and develop your own strength, and be open to the world and connect with like-minded partners. And of course, a friend and like-minded partner always has been and is the UK on our continent.
So, Prime Minister, you laid out how Britain has come to the defence and to the joint military action with its allies for a long, long time. But the current Secretary-General of NATO, after Trump's Davos speech, actually after Prime Minister Carney's speech, which talked about a rupture, he said, if you all are thinking that you can do what you have to do without the United States, then dream on. It's not going to happen. So how long do you think it'll take to get to this posture that you both say you need to get to?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that we're not looking at a future that tears us apart from the Euro-Atlantic alliance that we have. NATO has been the single most effective and successful military alliance the world has ever known, and we should never move away from it. I often and always base my thinking on what is the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground, so far as the UK is concerned, is we are working with the US on defence, security and intelligence 24/7, every single day. So that is the reality of what is happening, and that is as tight now as it's ever been. And I see no sign of that weakening, nor should it, because that's in the interests of the United Kingdom and the interests of Europe and globally. And that goes into defence, security, intelligence, obviously nuclear capability as well. And therefore, I'm often urged back in my own parliament that we should walk away from what we've got, and I reject that. But I think simply sitting where we are isn't good enough, and therefore the change does need to come. That needs Europe to be stronger, to be working more closely together, and that's why I said what I said about the UK-EU relationship. We're 10 years on from Brexit. We are not the Britain of the Brexit years. We're a Britain that wants to work with the EU even more closely in light of the challenge that we face here 10 years on. That will take time. We are working together. We had a very good UK-EU summit last year. We will have another one this year where we can make further steps forward. But this is of some urgency because I think that on defence and security, until the Ukraine conflict, we didn't really wake up to the reality that we're facing.
And I actually